בבקשה.
תעשה איזה notification קטן?
Yes.
סבבה.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Guy Hilton from Amdocs Revenue Management. Today in our Tech Talks, we're going to talk about optimizing signaling in 4G LTE networks. With me to discuss this topic is Ron Agam, our Vice President of Product Management. Hey Ron.
Hi Guy, thanks for having me.
Sure. So Ron, first question. With the shift from circuit switch networks to all IP-based network, there's an assumption that PCC signaling will be affected. What do you think about it?
Surely, we see indications of this happening in the market today. When you're using a smartphone on data networks, you're consuming more data. With LTE, you're consuming even more, 30%, double, and this drives more signaling load on the network itself. We also note that we have voice over LTE. This is coming into play. This is how you transport voice sessions on top of the LTE data network. This will create, no doubtedly, more signaling load on the network.
So there's definitely going to be impact on the networks. Does that mean we need a new approach to PCC signaling?
I think yes. We can use the architecture as defined today, but if we don't use it wisely, we can actually increase the load of the signaling on the network. And we're looking for ways to adapt the architecture and deploy it in a smart way.
So can you give me an example?
Sure. Do you know how our real-time charging system works, Guy?
Sure. Basically, it reserves a quota and consumes it, and then reserves another quota and consumes it, all the way until the session is ended or the balance is actually complete.
Exactly, great. So whenever I'm surfing the internet, I'm using any kind of texting messages on top of data, or I'm watching a video. In that instance, I'm creating a diameter transaction with the network that translates into signaling and signaling load. When I'm looking at the data services I'm consuming, I have a certain quota allocated to me. Now I have a monthly cap. For example, your monthly cap is?
3 gigs.
So 3 gigs. Now at the beginning of the month, I'm very far away from that cap that was defined for me, and I can actually play with the quotas and have very large quotas, so I create less transactions in diameter. Now towards the end of the month, or towards the end of this cap, I can actually increase the level of accuracy and have less quotas, so I can measure exactly how much you're using, give you a threshold alert so you're not in overage. In this, overall, we actually can reduce the signaling load on the network.
So the closer I get to the end of the cycle or the month or my quota, the more signaling I will have in order to figure out what I'm doing. But at the beginning, I'll have less. So all in all, I'm actually having less signaling than before.
Exactly. We call this dynamic quota allocation. And by this, we mean that we can dynamically change the quotas as you progress throughout the month, for example.
So other than dynamic quota allocation, are there any other elements we can look at to drive more efficient signaling in the network?
Sure. Another one is a construct defined by 3GPP called multi-service credit control. With this, we can actually wrap multiple services in a single diameter transaction. So we can use a data session for surfing the internet and a video session, and all in all, use one diameter transaction, and yet keep all the monetization models separately per service. This reduces further the load on the network.
And what about network peaks? We experience peak times in the network. Anything we can do to help that?
Great question. So we know that networks do not behave uniformly throughout the day. There are peak periods. And we want to try and balance that out, smooth that out. With our smart throttling feature, we can actually take some of the signaling that we need to address and shift it to another time where the network is not loaded as much. For example, when we have large groups of customers towards the end of the billing cycle, we can control when we actually send messages to measure the last consumption that they've had, and by that reduce the peak on the network.
So we've talked about dynamic quota allocation and about multi-service credit control. There's also an element where we talked about before PCRF, OCS, and other network elements that actually drive a lot of signaling. Anything we can do when we integrate PCRF and OCS to reduce that signaling?
Sure, we can do something there as well. The PCRF and the OCS, the online charging, are integrated through the SY interface. In our case, we actually have a shared subscriber model. When I have shared data plans, I can actually communicate with the PCRF in a single message addressing all the users of that shared data plan instead of addressing it one by one. This is another way to reduce the signaling load on the SY interface.
Great. So, Ron, thanks a lot for your time and explaining about optimizing signaling in LTE networks. Join us again for another Tech Talk, and you can find all our Tech Talks on amdocs.com. Thanks, and have a great day.
for sure. Yes.
ברור שהסיגנלים יושב בצפלינגן, ואז חשוב מאוד.
אין בעיה.
זה מאוד מאוד קריטי.